there's such a small number of people that share the same experiences that we've had, and it's like breaking into a train yard, for example. I mean, there's nothing like it, or seeing your work roll past on a train, or getting on a train and driving past a trackside painting that you've made. Those were definitely fun times, and I was chased many times but never caught, and those were some funny stories. But I think that it really got real. It's especially, I mean, I can only talk as a young man because those are my experiences, but I feel that it's a typical young man thing that you have this "it'll never happen to me" attitude, which is a very dangerous thing. And some of the situations I put myself in when I was younger were mad.
Hello and welcome to Freelance Pod. My name's Suchandrika Chakrabarti and I'll be your host. Freelance Pod is all about how the internet has revolutionised work. Each week I'll speak to someone working in a creative field and ask them how their industry has moved from analogue to a digital age, or how the internet has invented their job. If you like what we're talking about in the podcast, please do get involved on social. You can find Freelance Pod on Instagram as @freelancepod, on Twitter as @freelance_pod_. There's a Facebook group called Freelance Pod, and you can also sign up for the newsletter. The URL is in the show notes. Don't forget that the success of this podcast relies on you, the listeners. If you do enjoy it, please do rate, review and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, also known as iTunes. This means that other listeners will find out that this podcast exists and they'll come and join us too. So have we got a special episode of Freelance Pod for you? Yes, it is a crossover episode with one of the presenters of Creative Rebels. So the Creative Rebels podcast has gone straight to number 1 in the business charts on iTunes. It's been going for about a month, but they really burst onto the scene with a great first episode featuring Emma Gannon of Control-Alt-Delete. And I thought, well, why not speak to David Speed, who's one of the hosts, and see what he can tell me about making a podcast. So David is a graffiti artist. He's been painting graffiti since he was a teenager in the 90s. Graffiti itself has been gentrified and reinvented in the 20 years since, and it's now known as street art. So what David, Adam Brazier, who co-founded the company with him, and the other people they work with, what they do is they are paid by yoga studios and office spaces, and also brands who want to advertise with them. And they paint walls inside and outside with beautiful designs that people love to stop and stare at and take pictures with and put on Instagram. So one of the reasons for the success of the podcast, David thinks, is that they have a huge Instagram presence, about 40,000 followers. And he goes into a bit of detail about how they built that audience up. But I think more than anything else, it's the beauty of their images, some of which I've shared on the Freelance Pod Instagram and on the Twitter as well. David also at one point mentions a film called Style Wars. It's a 1983 documentary from New York City, and it looks at graffiti artists and hip-hop and breakdancing, all in one film. And it's on YouTube. I've put a link in the show notes. And it's just so delightful to go back and look at it. There's something so nostalgic about all these subway cars covered in graffiti. It really makes you think of those classic New York set films from the 70s and 80s. And growing up in Hornchurch, where I'm from, which is northeast London, some say it's Essex, but it is in the London Borough of Havering officially, graffiti really livened up what was kind of just another suburb of London. The district line goes through Hornchurch and over to Upminster where it terminates, and it's above ground there. So you'd catch glimpses of graffiti from bridges and going under arches, and it was always like a little secret, just something you noticed. It would always set my imagination going, like, who did that? Why did they take the risks to get up there? What do they get from it? And I feel like graffiti always livened up the scenery. So David himself, he grew up in South London, and as he mentions, he used to go down to Brighton quite a lot with his crew, and that's where he cut his graffiti artist teeth. So really fun to speak to David, and yeah, let's see what he has to say.
My name's David Speed. I'm a professional graffiti artist. I'm a speaker. I'm the host of the Creative Rebels podcast. What else do I do? A bunch of stuff. But I think have fun every day is kind of that's what we try to do anyway, because I think that's the most important thing. Like, happiness is the most important thing. So striving towards that and just pushing it every day.
So would you say artist is like your main job title plus what?
I suppose I'm best known for painting, and Graffiti Life is 9 years old now. So we've been going a long time and seen sort of a decent amount of success. So that's been cool. I think it's so hard to. I mean, we were talking earlier about Emma Gannon and her book, Multi-Hyphen Method. That's such a good way to describe people as a multi-hyphenate, because we want to put people into boxes, but everyone does so much nowadays, and everyone has a side hustle and a passion project and everything. So I'm best known for creating artwork, I would imagine, but in the beginning the artwork was definitely my passion, but now I've been intrigued by new things, and like podcasting is obviously brand new to me, but something that I'm really enjoying. Speaking is pretty new for me. On and off all my life I've been speaking here and there in different capacities, but that's certainly something that I'm definitely on a journey with, that I'm enjoying. So yeah, it's hard to define. Art does make me happy, it really does, and I love painting and I enjoy it, but the whole reason that we set the company up wasn't so that I could paint every day. The ethos behind Graffiti Life, it exists to provide opportunities for other artists and creatives, and I guess that's where I get my kind of buzz from, is helping other creatives. So everything that we've done since then, you can kind of tie into that ethos, because it's all been around helping other artists, helping other creatives. So by doing an advertising mural for whatever brand, that allows us to pay the rent of like our staff of 15 artists that work here and project managers. So yeah, I still am deeply passionate about art, but my life is going in other directions and it's pulling me in other, and I think that's fine. Like, trying new stuff. If it pops up and you think, oh, this looks fun, like, delve into it and see where it takes you. So certainly with the podcast, that's been something where I know that we can help a lot of creative people with it, and so that's why I've gone on to that. So it's very different from painting in the streets, but they both do the same thing for me, because they help creative people. So
do you want to name the podcast? And it's done well, it's only just been launched. And
yeah, the podcast is called Creative Rebels. It launched at number 1 on the iTunes business chart, which was amazing for us, and then it pretty quickly got picked up by iTunes and put on the new Noteworthy section, which obviously gave it another sort of boost. I think that we planned out, and we did have in our head that we did want a number 1 podcast. It's called Creative Rebels. I broke the law for 10 years of my life, painting illegally. We've always done, as a group, we've always kind of done what we've been told that we can't do. And when we looked into getting a podcast, literally the day that I first started researching it, went online, how to start a podcast, read some blog, and then started reading the comments. And the first comment was this guy who was saying, there's no point starting a podcast now, it's an oversaturated market, and if you don't have a big company behind you, then it's impossible and it's pointless, you should quit now. And I love hearing that. I love hearing you can't do something. So that's why we started. I was like, well, we're definitely doing that, and we're definitely going to make it work. And I thought, we want to reach as many people as possible. So starting strong and getting to number 1 on iTunes, as soon as you can do that, then in perpetuity you can say you're the number 1 podcast on iTunes, because it's true that did happen. So that was always a goal. And then what we like to do with our goals is we set the goals, and then we work backwards from the goal to work out the steps of how to get there. So with that, we were like, and I think as soon as you think we want to launch a number 1 podcast, then it's like, okay, well, it has to sound a certain way. It has to look a certain way for the visuals that you're going to see on iTunes and all that sort of stuff. It has to have a certain caliber of guests. These were all things that we had to consider. So then you start reaching out, and our episode 1 was Emma Gannon, who was a huge get for us, and especially when I think it's so important that people should realise that, like, the art of asking, because a lot of people would think, well, Emma Gannon's got this audience of thousands, she's had millions of downloads on her podcast, she's never going to come on my podcast because I've got zero audience, I've got no listeners, what can I offer to her? But all we offered her was the vision, and we were like, this is what we want to do with the podcast. She wrote straight back and said, yeah, that sounds great, let me know when. And it was as easy as that, and we were sort of like, oh, okay, this is going to be a lot easier than we thought. So we launched at number 1 by basically influencer marketing, I guess. But I think influencer marketing as a term I don't really like the connotations of that term. I feel like influencer marketing is very transactional. You contact an influencer, you say, here's my t-shirt or here's my cake, put it on your Instagram and I'll give you X amount of money. What we do is not that, is influencer relationships, which I think is so important. So we reached out to people who we thought were cool, that we thought had an audience that might be interested in the message that we had to spread. And we reached out to them and just kind of made friends with them, rather than saying, oh, can you do something for me? It's like, what can we do for you? And just gradually over time, meeting those people who will then, if they like you and think that you're decent, then they'll introduce you to other people. So that, once you get the ball rolling, that kind of really starts to build a network of people around you. And then when it came to launch day, we added up the audiences of all of our friends and people that we knew would share and talk about the podcast. And the audiences came to 1.5 million people, which sounds like a lot, but then you've got to take into consideration the algorithm. So not 1.5 million people were seeing those posts. And then you've got to take into consideration people's apathy. To get someone to actually do what you want them to do, which in this case was subscribe to or download or listen to a podcast, that's going to greatly decrease the numbers of people who actually seen the message, if they do actually manage to see it in the first place. So we knew it was going to be a challenge, but I mean, we love a challenge. So yeah, we launched it, had some amazing guests, and it seems that the momentum now seems to be rolling pretty strong with it. So that's been great.
Because you can't be transactional with a podcast. Like, I listened to the one with Emma earlier today, and it's a real conversation. It's really unpacking like feelings and thoughts, because for me, these jobs are very personal, and there's a personal story as to why you got into this. And so you can't just be like, I do one thing for you, you do something for me. You have to click with them as well. It felt like you guys did click on that first episode.
Yeah, I hope that we've clicked. I've not come out yet of an interview where I've been like, or it's been awkward or anything like that. And I'm sure, I think just the numbers game. I think eventually you're gonna have to come.
Not if you're thinking about their story, because that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about like, what stories do they have? Do they kind of fit? Would they want to talk to me about these stories?
I guess so. Yeah. If you're choosing people that you know have something of value to offer. I mean, I guess a lot of guests. So we're choosing guests who we think are gonna really help the people that listen to our podcast. People who want to like rebel against the 9 to 5 is something that we've spoken about a lot. And so we're talking to people who've quit their day jobs, they're doing something fun for a living. And so we're not necessarily getting people on who are super used to being interviewed or have preset questions. So when they first sit down, they may be quite nervous, and that's something we've got to kind of get used to is they're not used to having a microphone shoved in their face, and they have to deal with that. And then they're still processing, we're asking them a question and they're working it out in front of you, which is quite interesting. So, and I mean, I'm not an expert interviewer. I've done like 20 interviews now. So it's still a learning process of, I listen to them back and I'm like, oh, there was something there hanging in the air and I should have pushed more on this, or I should have asked another question. But it's all a journey and it's all fun. I think the other thing about ours is we do them all in person, and that's, I think, you can instantly build a rapport with someone if you meet them in person as opposed to over Skype, or which I get because of ease and the modern world that we live in, and the fact that you can have Seth Godin on your podcast because he's in New York and you're in London and whatever. I get that. But so far all of ours have been in person, and I think that's been really important. And we'll have a chat before we sit down. We don't just roll straight into the interview, so that the guest can feel used to you, and kind of talking about just establishing with them, like, this is what we want to get out of this interview. This is, which is about helping people. And then as soon as people know that they're in the hot seat and their job is to then help the audience, is they can then kind of start to formulate their journey of what they've been through and be like, well, what did I learn along the way? Like, I think the best way to learn is to sit someone down and be like, this is what I did and this is what I learned. And that's the best way to conduct an interview, I think, of like when you're trying to inform people of someone's story and how their learning can help you in whatever it is you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's kind of why I started this podcast. I'd gone freelance and I was having a bit of a bad day of it and wondering if I should go back into full-time work. And I thought, how do other people do it? And how do I find out? And I feel like podcasting and just talking to people, with the media industry, for instance, like 1,000 jobs have been lost in the US in January, like all these layoffs. And there's a big narrative like that. But I feel like it's these conversations where people talk about, well, I felt like this and I thought I'd take this direction, and possibly redundancy pushed them that way, or possibly just getting a bit bored of what they were doing. And I think it's in the conversations. That's what I'm really interested in. I think it's really interesting that you're doing yours. You want to do yours in person. I agree that that's the best way if you can. Going back to like how you got into graffiti, I feel like there's a kind of analog to digital move that you're doing, which is really interesting. But like, how did you start doing graffiti? Did you get in with people who were doing it? It's quite hard to start alone, isn't it?
Yeah. So I met someone who changed my life, and he'll be a guest. We've interviewed him, but it's not gone live yet. But yeah, I met someone called Paul Elliott, who took me under his wing so I started painting graffiti in 1999. Was the first time I touched a spray can, and then properly sort of in the year 2000 was when I first started painting. And back then it was kind of like a closed club that you had to be invited into. You had to know someone who did it. In London? Or? Yeah, so I grew up sort of in South London, around Croydon, that sort of area. And actually, I spent most of my time first learning in Brighton, because it was the one place we knew that we could go to without getting nicked. So we had to practice over and over again. We knew that to get better, and there was a legal area in Brighton. So, and also back in the year 2000, you could jump the train really easily. There were no barriers at Brighton Station, which is mental. You could just hop on a train from East Croydon and then get all the way to Brighton, and we'd have to go and hide in the toilets every now and then, like those tiny cubicle toilets. Me and Paul at 18 years old cuddling onto each other because we couldn't fit in this one toilet, waiting for the ticket guard to go past. I was young. And so yeah, we'd hop the train to get to Brighton, and we'd paint up there. But yeah, there was the internet existed, but it wasn't the platform that it is now. So I, through just chance circumstances, I was on a college trip to Amsterdam, and my tutor, there weren't enough rooms, and my tutor said, you're going to have to bunk with Paul. And I said, oh, don't put me in a room with him, he looks like a dickhead. And he said, no, you'll really like Paul, he does graffiti. And I was like, oh my God, okay, instantly. So started talking to Paul, and we got on like a house on fire straight away. We were into the same music, showed him my sketchbook, and he was like, you should paint. And I was like, I was hoping you'd say that. So
you were good at drawing, you always had a sketchbook going?
So I believe that there's no such thing as natural talent. I think I get stopped in the street a lot. So when you're painting in the public, I think there's some artists who there's one street artist who puts up a sign saying, please don't disturb me, no pictures. I think you owe it to the public, if you're in the public space, to any person who approaches you, to at least acknowledge them. So I have a lot of conversations in the street when I'm painting. And one thing that comes up over and over again is, you're so talented, and which is beautiful, and I humbly accept that, and it's really nice that people say that. But if I'm feeling fruity, then I'll say there's no such thing as talent, and I'll get into it. But I don't really do it because I know people think it's super weird because they're like, they can't comprehend it. But literally, when I first started painting, I sucked. I was absolutely rubbish. I just was obsessed with it, so I did it over and over and over and over again till I got good. I got a C for GCSE art. I was never gifted.
I mean, what is GCSE art though as well? Like, how can you encompass all artistic styles?
Yeah, I mean,
that's mad, isn't it?
Art schooling was never something that I enjoyed, and again, the rebellious side, they were asking me to do things in a certain medium, and I just wanted to use pencil. When I was 16, that was all I wanted to do. I just wanted to draw in pencil, and so I did everything I did was draw in pencil, and I got bad marks because I didn't tick their boxes of experimenting with different media. Now being older, I understand why they wanted me to experiment with different media, and maybe I would have fallen in love with charcoal drawing or whatever. But at the time, I was like, this is my art style. I want to draw in pencil. That's what I want to do. It's art. You can't tell me what's right and wrong. Also,
if that was the trajectory you were on, like learning to do that well, it seems really strange to then pull you out of that and make you use another instrument.
That's 100% what they wanted to do. Yeah. And then when I studied art at university as well, and I wanted to use spray paint, and they said, that's your comfort zone. You need to get out of your comfort zone. So yeah, I never really got on with being taught art, so I would never say I was good, but I enjoyed sketching, and I used to draw like comic book characters. So within art, if you're drawing like comic book stuff, it's never seen as it's not given much value. But to another 18-year-old boy who's well into hip hop and all of and like breakdancing and all of the stupid stuff that we were into at that time. Opening a sketchbook full of like b-boy characters and weird stuff going on, like Paul thought it was cool, so he took me under his wing, and we started painting, and then I got completely like sucked into that subculture and spent the next sort of 10 years painting around London. We painted in Brighton for a while, and then it was just getting too much of a journey, and we started painting locally around South London. And then we started, so there were various legal areas around London, but gradually, bit by bit, they were being shut down by local authorities, and street art, the term didn't exist. Graffiti was this underground kind of thing that wasn't respected and wasn't enjoyed.
It was a sign of urban decay, apparently, like the broken window.
Broken window theory, yeah. So the broken window theory being that if graffiti is in an area, then it must be a poor area and it must be a dangerous area.
I've never believed that.
Yeah, I don't think that exists anymore, because I think people realise that street art enriches an area. And actually, I mean, certainly we're in Shoreditch at the moment, and it's part of Shoreditch is the graffiti and the street art. It's why people visit it daily. Is to get photos of themselves posed in front of street art. No one would have taken photos in front of graffiti like in the early 2000s. It just wasn't seen in that way.
It's really interesting what you say about people stopping to speak to you in the street, because for me, in the 80s and 90s, graffiti was on the railways. And so I concluded, people have to be hidden, because they didn't want to get caught. So it's something about being hidden as an artist that made it possible. But the art itself was really, if you're in the right place at the right time on the train, it was really obvious.
Yeah, that was something that I had to come to terms with. Was previously I had always hidden in the shadows, created my work at night, and then people would find it the next day. However, as soon as I started the company and going legit, I was then out in public, and then you have to deal with people. So that was definitely a learning curve for me.
It's not often that someone making art has spectators while they're making it. That's probably the only medium.
Yeah.
Can't think of another one. So when do you think the tide was turning? I think the rise of Banksy did coincide with everywhere becoming illegal for graffiti.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
What was that like for you?
So Banksy did so much in terms of just changing everything. Most graffiti artists that you talk to don't have much good to say about Banksy. I guess because it's... let me think of an analogy. it would be like the kind of manufactured pop band. It would be like One Direction or whatever. It would be the kind of super trendy thing that's super popular, and because it's so popular, everyone else kind of rejects it.
I mean, it's such a specific style with the stencil as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of graffiti artists kind of are against that as well, because of the fact that it's easy, because it's a stencil. I say easy in inverted commas because there is still skill to stenciling. I mean, I know Banksy put on his website at one point, I remember reading a quote from him that was like, I don't know why you guys all get so excited over my work, anyone can do this, which is true. Like, anyone can create a stencil and then paint it in the streets. I mean, that is possible for any one person to do. I think he caught fire because of the ideas, less than the artistic skill that went into making his work. But so there's a lot of people who are Banksy detractors, but for me, I always say I wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for Banksy, because he was the one that got the public. It's like, I'll try a little bit of this, and then if that piques your interest, then you can explore more. And all of a sudden it opened people's eyes to, they'd buy a coffee table book on street art, Banksy would be on the front cover, which would get the book sold, and then they'd open it, and then they'd be like, oh, who's this? Oh, D-Face, oh, Faffy, or all of these artists. And it kind of opened people's eyes to, oh, there's more to this than just A, vandalism, and B, Banksy's work.
He was like the serial of podcasting in a way. He kind of legitimised will depend on where you stand, if you were already a graffiti artist or if you're the unsuspecting public.
Yeah, because then a lot of graffiti artists reject it because they've always had the opinion of, this is not for you. This is our thing. This is a underground subculture. There's a movie called Style Wars, and one of the main characters in that Scheme, I say characters, I mean he's a real guy, but Scheme, one of his quotes is, it's such a wonderful scene, he's having an argument with his mum. He's 16 and his mum's like, I don't know why you do this stupid graffiti, and she's like, people don't care about this, and he goes, it's not for people, it's for me and other graffiti writers, and so their tags would be written in a way so that only they could understand it, only they could read it, because it wasn't for public consumption, it was for the other writers. I understand that, but I mean, we're in 2019 now, and we're in a completely different world, and yeah, I mean, I create commercial paintings, like we use spray cans to create adverts and advertising for big brands, but as I said at the beginning, like, my goal for the company was always to create opportunities for artists, and advertising happens to be like a huge way that we can do that. I think I've understood that these adverts are happening whether you like it or not. They're going up. So I'd rather that they're created by hand, so that when you can look at them, you can actually appreciate something beautiful with them, no matter what it is that the message of whatever product it is they want you to buy. At least you can look at it and say, oh, that's been created with care and someone's hands, which I think is a beautiful thing. And also the fact that this going up is allowing artists to pursue their creative careers, which I think is really important.
And to get paid, because this is the constant kind of, London is expensive. If we want to live here, we do have to get paid. Again, it strikes me like podcasting, advertising, unlike any other kind, it's often read by the host, so it's kind of got the same texture as the rest of the podcast, in the way that graffiti style advertising will have the style of the artist. Yeah,
I think that definitely with podcasting, it's I don't think people resent it.
Yeah,
because they understand you've got to edit this thing, you've got to upload, you've got to pay for hosting. Like, it's not like you've got to buy all your mics, all of your equipment. Like, it's not free to do a podcast. And then the time commitment.
It is, yeah, it's a lot of time. I agree. But I like editing because I like the story. I like to build the story. It depends on the interview. Again, what you said about warming up. With some people, there's just more warming up. That's fine. And so I won't start with the, can you tell me your name and what you do? I save that, but I felt we were fine. I felt like you'd be like, this is fine. But for some people, I try and make it more like a chat and leave that stuff to the end because that reminds you this is an interview, and then that means I have to restructure it. So it just depends on the person.
Yeah,
but you've been doing this, you seem fine. And I've just been interviewing people for a long time as a journalist. All it takes with interviewing is, I think it helps if you're curious and you always have questions, but practice. So you just feel more relaxed each time.
Yeah.
You go with it. I've got a few things. So I've read like stuff about your story, looked you up. But to be honest, who knows where this will go? And actually what I've been thinking while I've been speaking about graffiti is part of those teenage boys going, Mum, like, I make this art not necessarily for the public. Isn't it that adrenaline and the ducking and diving is a huge part of it? And that's to do with age. What is it like making the graffiti kind of in a legit way then? Did you feel a bit disappointed, or did you feel like, I'm glad graffiti is getting its time in the sun?
That's such a good question.
It's so complex as well.
It is really complex. And I would be a liar if I said that I didn't miss those mad days, because they were fucking mad.
And they're bonding as well. Like, you're bonding with your new friends, with the pool and with the gang. Yeah,
I think there's such a small number of people that share the same experiences that we've had, and it's like breaking into a train yard, for example. I mean, there's nothing like it, or seeing your work roll past on a train, or getting on a train and driving past a trackside painting that you've made. There's those were definitely fun times, and I was chased many times but never caught, and those were some funny stories. But I think that it really got real. It's especially, I mean, I can only talk as a young man because those are my experiences, but I feel that it's a typical young man thing, that you have this "it'll never happen to me" attitude, which is a very dangerous thing. And some of the situations I put myself in when I was younger were mad. And I remember being just outside Clapham Junction, and as the trains were rolling by, like literally feeling my clothing being like sucked towards the train, like you can feel this pull. And artists have died from being in a place where they've been like sucked into the path of the train. I've felt that before. I've walked down the tracks and I've felt small electric shocks jump off of the third rail onto my legs before. I mean, one of the most ridiculous things I did was in Brighton, just outside the train station in Brighton. I think there's 5 lines that come into the station. I remember me and a couple of other vandals jumping over those 5 tracks, but it was the middle of the day, so there was full train service, because normally you paint at night when the trains aren't running. There's full train service, and there were but these were the lengths that we went to in order to create our art
and express yourself.
Yeah, we thought we were doing something really important, however misguided it was. We never labelled ourselves at that time as vandals, or we didn't think we were doing anything destructive. We were creating artwork, and we thought it was important, and we thought that people should see that we were. And I guess that's another young man thing of we were searching for our identities. I'm still processing all of this, and probably will be for many years. So I don't know exactly where I stand on it, but I mean, I can't go back and change anything, so I just have to roll with what I've been given.
I'm really nostalgic for it. So I grew up in Hornchurch, which is Essex, London, just about in London, and it's got the district line, it's above ground, and I'm really nostalgic for those days of the graffiti. I liked it that there was someone had gone and lived this entire other life and gone and made it, because I was a kid then, so I liked it, and all of this stuff had happened in the night without anyone knowing, and something had been created.
Yeah, it's quite romantic, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I definitely was putting myself into these mad situations, but there came a time where I was watching a lot of peers be sent to prison for this, and I mean that's a whole other conversation, because I feel like we should have been given community service. We should be asked to clean it up. But, I mean, we're being put in the same cells as murderers, rapists, and also at that time. I mean, definitely like 2006, 2007, when people were really being sent down for graffiti, because there was such a purge on it. I remember reading stories of where there was one judge who sent an artist down for longer than the day before he'd sent a rapist down, and to me that just didn't compute. So it started to get really real, and I started to sort of see the repercussions of, you're only bulletproof for a certain amount of time, and at some point this is gonna bite. And I so that started to worry me. And whilst all my mates are getting sent to prison, I'm sort of thinking, I don't want a 9 to 5. I'm kind of looking at, I was working a part-time retail job, and I was looking at the guys who were in full-time retail and how they never seemed to leave, and how there were people in their 40s and 50s working in retail who were getting up to like manager positions, and I just thought, this is not what I want. And so in 2010 was when we first set up Graffiti Live. And so to bring it back around, because your original question was getting the buzz from, I had to, so I no longer was able to get, because I couldn't carry on painting illegally and run the company, because I would have been made like, so there was one artist who worked on the EastEnders set, and did the graffiti for the EastEnders set, and then he was arrested, and he was given quite a large sentence. I think he got a 4-year sentence, and for him it was such a massive news story. And I thought, if I get caught painting somewhere I shouldn't be, then, and I run a graffiti company, then that's a news story waiting to write itself, and that would destroy the business. And you start to have the more responsibilities you have, and the more you have other people relying on you, the more you have to sort of start to, I hate to say it, start to grow up. God, I don't want to ever grow up, but yeah. So I started to take things more seriously, and then I found that I got so much more reward from, because graffiti was such a small closed thing. I was just painting for the other writers, and I wanted to become, like, it's called getting up, having your name, I wanted to get to this stage where sort of everyone knew who I was. And once I got to that stage, it wasn't rewarding, and mostly you got jealousy from people who weren't at that stage, which I totally didn't see coming. I thought you reached this golden pinnacle of everyone knows your tag and knows who you are, and that's the. You
end up quite isolated in the end. Actually, you think you'll be popular. You think it will add to any popularity you have, but it ends up people envying you. And you're quite isolated.
It was horrible. Didn't enjoy it. And then when we started making, I guess, street art for public consumption, it was like, oh wow, this is great. People are so positive about this. Whereas, like, trying to get props from other graffiti writers is impossible. But the public are like, that's dope, I love it. So all of a sudden we were getting like instant feedback on what we were doing. We weren't hiding in the shadows anymore, we were putting it out front. And so you're getting that instant feedback, people walking by feeling what you're doing. And so that was rewarding. And then, I mean, so we've got a Graffiti Life, we've got an apprenticeship scheme. So we've had 3 apprentices come through here who we've taught to spray paint from scratch.
So they don't need any experience, just a real interest?
They need to be good painters, because I can't teach you how to paint, but I can teach you how to use a spray can. If you can already paint, then
okay, so with brushes? Okay.
So we've taken a few amazing brush painters and turned them into spray painters. So that's been a real, and like, the reward from that, because I was training to be a primary school teacher, so whilst I was running down the tracks at night, during the day I was really tired and telling the kids to behave, and like living a weird double life. So for me, that was always there. I always loved doing that. I always loved like helping people. My parents are foster carers, so I've always like grown up around kids, and it was kind of always it was always the underlying thing of like, oh, David will be a teacher when he grows up. Like, that was always the thing. So I thought that was the path that I was supposed to be on. And then when we started taking on apprentices, it's like, oh, there's that thing, that kind of itch that I had, and that was a really good way to like work on that. So
it's willing to nurture people.
Yeah. And I get more from nurturing a young artist than I ever will from like putting myself in extreme danger, hanging off the edge of a cliff or something like that, because that was fun at the time, but it's a fun instant adrenaline high, as opposed to like this sustained, I guess, level of happiness. I guess it's happiness of giving back, helping, and being a part of someone's journey and creating with them is like that's just really beautiful for me. So to answer your question, after about 20 minutes,
it was a big question.
that's where I get my kicks, and it's ultimately been more fulfilling and more rewarding.
I feel like now you have urban explorers, that those kids who go to the top of these skyscrapers, but they do it for the digital appreciation. They might get some initial feedback from people around, but they're doing it for a really big audience. But part of what graffiti was doing it for a tiny audience and nothing more.
Yeah, I think even with the Urbex guys though, there's little underground forums where they're all kind of, I don't think all of them are doing it just for the
No,
Instagram
you're right.
likes.
Those are the ones that make the headlines when something terrible happens. Yeah. Such an interesting area. I always liked the idea of graffiti. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing anything I wasn't in that world, but I liked seeing it because I like to think of what the world is like behind it. But you have to leave it behind at some point. It is really dangerous. Plus, the law was starting to go, we've kind of done everything we can with drugs. Let's find this and criminalise it, because those are insane sentences. There's no need for those. So for you, was it a case of, right, I set this company, there are lots of walls that are being made available to us that are legal, that were councils kind of offering up walls and saying,
No, I wish. It's still like the hardest part of our job is finding walls.
So how does it work then? How did you decide to set up the company, and did you know there would be a supply of canvases, I suppose?
No. So day one of the company is me and a friend of mine on Croydon High Street with an easel and a canvas drawing. And at the time, I really didn't want to go, and I kicked and screamed, and I said, oh, come on, we're not going to, this is not the way to start a company. But we didn't know any other way. You have to get attention in order to start anything. You have to have attention on you. And so we did it. We took the canvas, started drawing and handing out these crap business cards that we'd made. And we got one job from that, and that was the first domino. And then you just, from that job, you get another job, and you use it to build up your portfolio, and then you start contacting people and say, oh, it was a little yoga studio we did, and so that then was out, oh, we've just done this yoga studio, how would you like us to do your dance studio or whatever, and we just move on, try and it just gradually grew bit by bit from there.
Did you know to document your work? Because obviously with the graffiti, you completely wouldn't document it. It's almost the adrenaline and then the memory of it and the friendships. But with this, it's like, we need a website and we need to put pictures of the yoga studio. Or was that always there from the start?
So I did document my illegal stuff. I just didn't used to keep it in my house, because if you catch a raid, then and you've got a photo book, then they'll do you for every single thing in the book.
So people would hide them.
They would,
wow.
but even then, that's not 100% effective, because the British Transport Police build a portfolio on every single artist. So they'll start to, they're graph nerds. They know who's who, and they'll go around taking photos of every single piece, and then they'll put that into your portfolio. The guy I mentioned earlier, the EastEnders set designer who got sent down for 4 years, the way that they got him such a harsh sentence was there was this particular train yard that they knew him and his crew were painting in. They knew that they were there most nights. They let them do it because they were building this portfolio on them. So they could have arrested them night one, but instead of doing that, they let them keep on going. And I don't know whether this was brought up in court, but it seems like it shouldn't be allowed. It's almost like, we don't, like, you're a serial killer, but we know you're doing it, but we're not going to stop you because we want to do you for the most amount of time, we want to give you the death penalty. It was like that. So they were building up these portfolios because they knew these guys were hitting the same spots over and over again, and they were just collecting enough information And I read somewhere that the court case cost more money than the claimed vandalism. So to the taxpayer, the court case was more expensive than the vandalism that the guys had
It's a political
caused.
move then at the end of the day, really, isn't it? It's like,
I don't know. It's got to be something deeper. There's probably something to do with money, and it's something to do with jobs and vote winning and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, I digress. What was the question?
digression is always really good. I love digression. Those are the best bits because someone is telling you something about themselves and their story, which is really good. You were talking about starting it in Croydon that day. So you had the yoga studio.
Yeah.
And did you know you had to document it digitally, I suppose?
That's right, yeah. So straight away, we knew that the internet was changing things. This is 2010. So we got on Twitter, we set up a website, and we knew that an easier way of marketing than standing with a canvas was going to be through the internet. However, when you first start a website, you're not indexed on Google, and it's impossible for people to find you. So we had a good, 3 or 4 months of building content in order to kick off SEO. And I mean, we weren't business people, so we had to learn what is SEO. I mean, just reading business blogs, using the internet to learn how we could use the internet. And that was it. So, and I mean, initially our first website, a lot of it was photos of our paintings in legal areas because it was the only content we had. We contacted every single artist that we were friends with and said, do you mind if we use your stuff on our website, because we've got to fill it with content somehow. So a lot of them were just like letter pieces in halls of fame around the country. But I mean, we didn't put anything illegal on there, obviously, but just legal walls that people had painted because we had to have something. So it was all about content, and it still is. I mean, our website still has to be updated regularly and fed. You have to feed the content beast. One post probably takes at minimum a day, and probably 2 or 3 days to paint a masterpiece, and then that's one Instagram post that you see in your feed for 3 seconds. You double tap it and then you move on, and that's in a way is heartbreaking. Humans are attracted to fear. I think so. There's Time magazine realised that, I think it was in the 50s or 60s, it realised as soon as it started changing its headlines to negative, it sold more papers. And so the reason that we're surrounded by so much negativity is because we buy it. And if we didn't buy it, if we bought positivity, everything would be roses.
I promise you, haven't been jealous for 13 years. It is like bad news it sells. And I think it was Ted Hughes who said, like, the worst times are the best to remember. Weirdly, because they imprint themselves very strongly on your brain. Often art comes out of the worst times. Yeah,
we recorded an episode today, and we were talking to a guest about that, and we look back on the days when we started up the company, when we literally had nothing. We were in this old garage in South Norwood. It was freezing cold. We were like huddled around an oil radiator, eating super noodles, and just cold and depressed. And we look back on those times, like going out on these jobs, like we were getting like 100 quid that we had to split 3 ways. I mean, like literally getting paid nothing. And a lot of stuff we were doing for free because we were just building our portfolio, building our social proof, building our brand, networking. And those times, I mean, it's great now. People see this big studio, and they see all of our Instagram followers, and they see all the clients that we're working for, and they just go, oh wow, it's amazing. And it is, it's absolutely beautiful. But what they don't see is everything that went into it. I mean, we're 9 years old. Like if you're committed to building something and you put 9 years into it, you can't fail but to build something. And we look back on those times where we would take trains to the middle of nowhere to work on these jobs. I mean, me and Adam, we used to for our lunches, we'd go out, we'd buy a tub of Philadelphia and a French stick and share it between us, because that would be like about 3 quid. And so I mean, literally just dry bread, just dunk it into the Philadelphia. That was our lunch, and that was our lunch for a year and a half in the beginning. just going out painting these jobs, and we couldn't afford to eat, so we just had to buy this cheap stuff. Look, I mean, at the time, horrible. Look back on that now, like, what an amazing time that was.
Yeah, when you are really creative and in the flow, you kind of don't want to stop to eat, and it's really annoying to stop to eat, so there's kind of slightly that. But there is something about the times you sail close to the wind and you took risks. At the time, it's almost too much to really take in, and you don't know if it's going to work. That's the thing. But if it does work, and when it does work, you get a bit comfortable, and you kind of go, "Oh, I miss that time when I didn't know if it would work."
I think comfort is the worst thing for a creative. I think it's the thing that holds a lot of people back, and I think that once the bills are paid, that's the place where a lot of people just get stuck, because this job pays this rent, and I have this much for food, and I have this much for travel, and I get my mobile phone bill paid, and so I am comfortable. And so when you're comfortable, you don't need to do anything more, because the hierarchy of needs, you've got shelter, you've got food, like everything is taken care of. So at that stage, why push yourself? But it's the people who do push themselves past the comfort that really sort of start to achieve things and become more, I think.
Do you think that matters more than natural talent then? Almost, it's tenacity, but I'd also call it, it's just an urge really, isn't it? You're like, I have this energy to go and create something, I can't really stop it. I have to satisfy it by at least trying. It may or may not succeed, that's by the by, but I've got to go and do it. Do you think that's more important than natural talent?
I think action trumps everything. And natural talent is something that people use as an excuse to let themselves off the hook of, oh, I wasn't born a good painter, or I wasn't born, like, and they look at other people and they say, oh yeah, but they were born with it. That, by saying that allows them to not try. But the ones that do try and go, I suck at this, and they beat themselves up and they follow people on Instagram who are the experts in their field, and they compare themselves. I mean, there's that saying, comparison is the thief of joy, which is so accurate.
And it's really hard because you can't control other people's reactions to your work.
I think putting out your content, I hope that our content inspires people.
Yeah.
And the whole message behind our podcast, and yours as well, is you can do this.
Yeah. It's really similar, I think, asking other people how they've done it. And you can't do exactly what someone else has done because it's really particular to your personality and your history, but you can learn from everyone. Yeah, just letting your ideas percolate. It's just action over everything. People are just held back and if you don't take action, then nothing can happen. If nothing changes, nothing changes. Yeah, and I've realised since going freelance, if you don't put the work out there, no one knows if you can do it or not. You can't blame them for that. Yeah. You've just got to do it and see what happens. I've got 3 followers on Medium. 3 followers. I think it was more than me. I mean, I'm posting there regularly, and long articles, like 1,000 words each time. I'm not a fast writer, but it's a journey. I have to keep going. I've got 3 followers. What a great start. And it's reaching out and producing. So I'm not going to measure my success by the metrics, but then I think in order to be successful, you have to be able to hold 2 competing ideas in your head. So whilst I'm happy with my 3 followers, I also want to impact as many people as possible. So I hope that eventually my medium takes off and I can impact a lot more people. So it's a dance, it's a balance, but it's action over everything, because if I don't post the articles on Medium, then I definitely won't help anyone. That's the thing, isn't it? The fear and self-belief, I think, is often what separates someone who's had a career with creative successes in it and someone who wishes they had. And you've got to take yourself over that line. There's nothing anyone else can do. If your content's good, then you'll find an audience for it. People share what they like. Yeah. And I think that a recommendation from a friend is really, really powerful. It's our one call to action at the end of our podcast is, if you enjoyed this, or you think that you know someone who might benefit from listening to this, please share this with them. People like to feel cool. They like to know. So them then going, listen to this. This will really help you. Makes them
the nice person makes them look cool because they've found something cool and they've shared it with you.
Definitely, yeah.
So I think just rely on that currency. And yes, there are a lot of podcasts, but I can't remember the stat of people that don't listen to podcasts.
I think it was in the Emma Gannon episode. She was saying 1 in 4 people in the UK do listen.
Yeah.
So 75% of the population don't. Yeah.
So
and
what
also,
a growth market. I mean, how can there be too many podcasts?
No, I think discovery is tricky. But someone said there are like 600,000 podcasts on Apple at the moment. How many books and films and songs are there?
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter how many there are because you have the internet. It's actually easier to find them and to try an album out. And I think we live in an amazing age, and we've lived through a change from analog to digital, which I think is absolutely fascinating.
Even if you fail spectacularly publicly in front of everyone, the next day they've moved on, and then you pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, and you carry on going. I think that the creative industries are the most important. I mean, for our economy, they're absolutely huge. It's an untapped market that people don't enter because they don't have the confidence in themselves. Because we, as artists, the stereotypical artist, like in the 1980s, if you made a film and you wanted to depict someone as a loser, like the loser boyfriend would be this like, oh, I'm an artist. And it's part of the lexicon, the starving artist. It really annoys me. There's no reason why you should be a starving artist. A lot of artists will focus on the craft and they don't focus on the marketing, and you have to understand that with any creativity, with any art, and using art in its broadest sense, if you're a writer, if you're a poet, if you're a singer, whatever it is that you do that is creative, that is your art, and your art is one half and the marketing of your art is the other half, and it's really important, and it's a skill, and it's something you need to build a tribe of people around you. There is a tribe for every single person, and we think that there isn't. And when we have no social proof because we only have 10 followers, that's when it comes back to what I was talking about earlier of just grabbing one person at a time. And you do that by creating relationships with people and delivering value to them in whatever way that may be, whatever your gift is, because we all have something that we're good at that we can, and even if you don't, you can get good at anything. You can get good at anything. You've just got to try it, practice it, and do it over and over again. So it all comes down to mindset. I think tactically everything is on Google. If you want to learn how to, I mean, because I tested this the other day because I thought, I wonder if that's true. I Googled how to launch a #1 podcast. There's like 5 or 6 blogs with step-by-step people who have done it, and I'll write a post on it as well to add to that as well. But I think we like reading these things of tactically how, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to action and mindset. If you believe that you can do something, because if you don't believe that you can do it, you'll never do it. So you have to conquer that. You have to conquer your fear, get over that, and then you'll fly. And it's a long process. I logged onto Instagram this morning and I saw there's this artist that I follow. He posted, just reached 10k followers. It's only taken me 3 years. Can't believe it. Thank you guys so much. And I loved the way he framed it, because if for most people, if you pick them up and you say, how many followers do you want on Instagram, and that like 10k is the first big one you hit because you're able to do swipe up stories at that point. It's kind of a big deal, and you have a K next to your name, which is lovely. Like 10k, that's beautiful. So a lot of people, that's a big goal for them. So they'll go, yeah, I want to reach 10k. If you then say to them, that's going to take you 3 years of hard work, most people will go like 3 years, and it will be a negative thing for them. I haven't got 3 years. You've got the whole rest of your life ahead of you. 3 years is a relatively small amount of time to focus on one thing and do it well. And one thing through interviewing our guests that we've started to notice is 3 years is actually a magic number. If you do something for 3 years over and over again, it seems to be that's the point where things start to happen. Certainly in our business, 3 years was like, okay, we can pay the rent now. Like 3 years was, we're established now, we've got a decent following, we've got inquiries coming into the inbox on a regular basis, and we were starting to establish ourselves. 3 is the magic number. And I think that if people can commit to themselves of Google how to do it, that'll show you what you're doing, And then once you know what you're doing, just putting it into action, fighting off our human need to relax and watch Netflix and whatever it is that makes us comfortable, get out of that comfort, put yourself in a situation where this is hard work. It's boring, because I mean, our phones are designed for this dopamine hit, they're enjoyable, and then all of a sudden when you start putting the work in and you're researching the top hashtags in your niche, and you're then commenting on all of those top hashtags, and you're doing the Gary V $1.80 strategy, Google that, it's really important, and you're doing that, all of a sudden you're not getting any joy from being on Instagram or being on a social network, because you're working. And if you can push through that and keep going, and you can do it for 3 years, which is a long time, then I guarantee you things will start to happen. That's a really long answer to your short question that you asked me, but I passionately believe in it. So
yeah, tenacity, self-belief, action more than anything else. Don't just imagine how perfect it would be. It will be imperfect, but it's better when it's real.
Yeah, and it might change. This is the thing, like a lot of people have a vision for how it's going to be, and be prepared that what it ends up being might be something totally different. I don't know where podcasting is going to take us. Our podcast has been out for a month, but already we've been asked to do live sessions in the Apple Store. Like, already things are coming through. Like in 3 years' time, if we can commit to consistently putting out content for the next 3 years, who knows where that'll take us. I mean, I want to get booked on Joe Rogan's podcast. Like, I mean, big goals, set big audacious goals, and trying to fulfill them. Because even if you don't get to them, the journey is fucking fun.
Yeah. What is anything I didn't ask you that I should have done?
Oh God, no, I don't know. If I can help anyone, then reach out to me. I'm at David Speed UK on Twitter, and Creative Rebels podcast.
What are you guys on Instagram? Which is the main one?
We are, for the podcast, we're at Rebels Create, and for Graffiti Life, we're at Graffiti_life. And we'll keep making stuff as long as you guys keep enjoying it.
So thanks to David Speed for giving me his time and talking to me about graffiti and Instagram, and about how the Creative Rebels podcast got off to such a great start. Well, that's it for another episode of Freelance Pod. If you enjoyed what we talked about in this episode, please do get involved on social. You can find Freelance Pod on Instagram as @freelancepod, on Twitter as @freelance_pod_. There's a Facebook group called Freelance Pod, and you can also sign up for the newsletter. The URL is in the show notes. Don't forget that the success of this podcast relies on you, the listeners. If you do enjoy it, please do rate, review and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, also known as iTunes. This means that other listeners will find out that this podcast exists and they'll come and join us too. That's it for now. Speak to you again soon. Goodbye.